I'm not going to start with last Sunday's headlines. Cholera in Pretoria. If you turn a page, it says 3-year-old baby died because no power. If you keep on paging, there's an article about poor infrastructure in some metro. It's not an engineering newspaper, it is the Sunday Times. And we get this, and then you ask yourself, but why are we where we are? And therefore I'm just going to present a bit about asset preservation and how you manage that. We need to be ahead and not, in other words, we need to be proactive. We should not wait for the newspaper to tell engineers, professional engineers, EXA, thank you, professional engineers, that there is a problem. The other night, you've seen my picture on Carte Blanche, where we spoke about the bad roads. I got some feedback, people saying, normally when you're on Carte Blanche, you're actually the bad guy. But luckily we could turn it around a bit to say, but we have to do something about it and not be, as professionals, the same as the man, woman on the street. So what is it that we need to do? So I'm going to talk a little bit about, next. I'm asking myself, now what is it that we need to consider to become better? So I'm only going to have 5 points. But those 5 points are quite detailed. And each of those, whatever is presented here, could be a 5-day course. So much has to be done. It is not just because we hear it, now we know it. It is far more than that. So, who are the parts and what are the parts in this dilemma that we are in? I've heard enough tonight about the assets. Yes, the assets are there. This building is an asset. Everything that we have, those are the assets. We have heard about funding allocation. Isa, you've done it, you told us, money. But I've also heard of money not being spent. I've also heard tonight about inappropriate spending. So funding matter is not just the rands and cents. I've heard about the authority. Later on I'll refer to that not as the authority but as the owner. Because the owner, it means you take ownership. That is something different than to say, I am the mayor or I'm the premier of a province, mayor of a municipality or metro. You have to own it. I look after my car. You look after your house, your flat. You are the owner. And if we don't change that mindset, we are not going to fix what we have. Then we have politicians. They promise us, and we believe them. But do we measure? Then we have national government. We've heard exactly what national government going to do. A national government is different to the provinces, the metros, the municipalities, the state-owned companies. I've just sat down when I've heard all of these numbers and I've just added together. Excluding state-owned companies, there are 323 infrastructure owners in the country. Isa, will you help us? Tepu, will you help us go and visit each of them Just imagine 323, but in a day, in a year, we only have 200 working days. How do we, as I'll now put myself, I'm jumping around between these boxes. If I'm now working in national government, I am responsible to go and check, to review. Like EXA is reviewing whether we do our job. I wouldn't be able to do it in a year. So isn't that part of why we are where we are? So I'm going to unpack these now, and I'm going to be quite fast with it. So the asset preservation activities are clear. We need to know. In Afrikaans we say, om te meet is om te weet. To measure is knowledge. Therefore my number about 323 plus estate-owned companies. The moment you start throwing those numbers around, you start thinking, but what does it mean? How do we control? How do we help? Condition assessment. Condition assessment is not, it's good, bad, and the other thing. It's excellent in the IRC report to say it is an A or an E. But why is it an A and an E? The IRC report goes beyond just reporting the condition. What we also need to know is that there are pockets of excellence. But we need to use those examples and ensure that the others also follow. Or why did it not go through in all instances? Maintenance planning, performance monitoring, risk analysis, I've heard all of these topics. Investment decision making. I hear Isa saying that we have a pipeline. This is how we're going to deal with this. So, but how do we actually do this? It's easy to, in this room, to say we need to do it, but how do we do that? Do we know that? So, why is it required? I've heard it enough tonight. Poor infrastructure have a negative impact on social life, particularly the poorest of the poor. But I hear from the politicians, we serve the poorest. But then why do we not deal with infrastructure? Reduced access to essential services. Again, remote areas do not get priority because nobody sees that. Children can't get to school. Mothers need to collect water far away. Mothers need to battle to get to a clinic. It's vulnerable, safety risks, health and environmental aspects, negative economic consequences. We know all of that. So let's unpack those 5 things. So it's easy. We all have 5 fingers. So each of these fingers will reflect something. Infrastructure asset management. Why? Why do we need to do it? Because we need sustainability. Let's just go one back. So, don't worry, I'll get there. We need to deal with the early maintenance needs, and all of these are many steps. It's not just one thing, early maintenance assessment. Analyzing the data and assess the conditions. Risk associated. Which asset are more critical than others? You need to know that. I've heard it so many times tonight about life cycle planning. Without life cycle planning, you may spend or allocate your money at the wrong project for the wrong reason. If we do what we are saying we're going to do to have sustainability, what would be the outcome? We will know what to do, when to do that, what will it cost, who to do it, why do we do it, and how to do it. So once we know all of these things, we say, fine, thumbs up. This is our thumb, first item. We know what, when, why, how much. If you look at the next matter, the 323 plus the state-owned companies, they're there to ensure resilience of the infrastructure. They should have policy and governance procedures. So, similarly to EXA telling us, you must be able to do the following things, then you become a professional. In the same way, the owners need to be able to say the following procedures need to be in place to ensure looking after the decision-making processes. Luckily, can everyone hear me at the back? I can talk without it. It's back again. Decision-making processes. How do we take that information from the asset management and turn it into practice? Financial management. We've discussed that. Do we spend the money at the right place, for the right purpose, at the right priority? Do we have the technical expertise in the owner's environment? We cannot only have national government telling the municipality how to do it. They need to know their own circumstances so much better and do that. Asset maintenance will then fall into place. If we do that, we will have continuous improvement and preservation of assets by the owner, taking ownership of that. Funding considerations. There need to be a motivation, but they need to be adequate. It's not just, we need 15 billion rand. May I share quickly? In the roads environment, I was part of the roads assessment of the IRC. The need on backlogs on roads, paved roads, of 500 billion. Okay, so you spoke about 220 billion for water in Johannesburg. How do we spend 500 billion on paved roads? Remember now, those are not the normal maintenance. Those are roads that are so bad. Gravel roads, 400 billion. The allocation in the budget speech was 900 billion, of which Sunroll will get 300. State-owned enterprises will get 400. Therefore, 200 billion remains to be divided by 323 different authorities for different elements. So do the sums. Long-term planning and life cycle considerations need to take cognizance of while we do the funding allocation. It's clear that the budget speech is not helping us enough. But maybe the information from the owners are not helping us to deal with that answer. Cost-benefit analysis. If we do something earlier, we can save money. While if we wait until it's totally depleted, the cost of rebuilding is substantially higher. Asset prioritization, same matter there. But we have to monitor and be accountable. How we spend that money. Is it at the appropriate project? Why do we need to do that? To sustain infrastructure assets. The role of politicians. Yes, there is a role for politicians. Policy and regulation is given to them. This is how we are going to serve our people. We need to do that. They need to agree on the funding allocation and prioritization. They are part of the political decision making. Stakeholder engagement and communication. I've heard earlier tonight somewhere with all of us saying we have to communicate better. Whose job is that? our politicians. I'm not saying they shouldn't be there. Yeah, we all have a place to do this. Why? For oversight and accountability. If there's cholera in Pretoria or Tshwane, somewhere we have made a mistake. That's not to have a commission of inquiry, but let us fix that. You hear? It's a different side of the same coin. Because they, the politicians, shape the trajectory of sustainable infrastructure. They influence that. National government, what is their role? Again, national policy. But that needs to be brought down to the owner with standards and guidelines, funding and resource allocation, monitoring and evaluation. The big thing that I'm missing, I hear in the Auditor General's report, so many municipalities are non-functional on financial matters. But who is ensuring that those authorities become functional in terms of infrastructure? Yes, I've heard tonight also about the emergency and disaster management activities. That is where national government can come in and say, we see here is something that happened to you. It's not because of your bad planning or bad management. It was a disaster. And that is where national government can support. But very important, and Tepo, you said it, capacity building and technical assistance. Somebody need to know where the gaps are so that we can improve. I'm back at my 323 authorities. Why? Because it is a constitutional obligation. Now, if we do all of this, what will happen? If we do it, it will be in heaven. If it's not, we will suffer if it's ignored. So, what not to do? With assets, no asset management. We shouldn't do that. And funding, incorrect allocation and spending. Authority or the owner, no technical expertise. Luckily, we are, with the OEW process, there will be a regulation that says this is, but we can't wait until then. We have to start doing it now. The politicians, they shouldn't have their own agendas. We should serve the people. National government can't turn a blind eye with no consequences. I've said enough. I just want to put quickly another hat on. Stephen referred to, now what is SAICE? I'm putting my SAICE hat on. What are we doing? Stephen mentioned that we've agreed to have that working group, and we are going to use our divisions to talk to branches, like Johannesburg branch, who can help us talking to the water fraternity. We've heard their story. To talk more to the MISA representatives. They know more. So that we can really build those 5 elements in so much stronger way that we should, or have done perhaps in the past, that we really can get to that. Alignment is required. And I am saying, and I know Stephen is going to support me when I say that, with all of those elements there, SAICE as a learned society, a voluntary association, is there to teach people, to guide people, to motivate them, because we have the technical know-how and we are part of the total picture. Thank you very much, Chair.